All right, we are back with a new video, and we are back updating the Survivor SA Power Rankings following week 4 of episodes. And this was quite the roller coaster. We had quite a lot of gameplay happening, 4 whole rounds, in fact. And I actually can't believe we're already down to the final 7. It feels like the season has just flown right by, but that's just how things are. But as usual, there are 11 players to rank here, and let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 11, we have the first boot from this week, and here we have Toni. And it's not too surprising to see Toni go out here. As I said, she was sort of a pretty big target coming into the merge round, sort of being this leader of the opposition group to the Breakfast Club. And while we definitely saw her attempt to save herself, I really got the sense she was going to be taken out here. Now, the reason I didn't have her at the very bottom of the rankings last week was I felt like there was a bit of a chance she could have had an underdog run here, but obviously, given her game position, it's not too surprising she was taken out here in this spot. So because of that, she is here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and we have the next boot to talk about. And here we have Dante. And similar to Toni, it's not too surprising to see him go out here. He was such a big threat throughout a lot of the pre-merge here. We got constant talk of people wanting to turn on him, even people he was aligned with, people like a Marion and a Marion, talking about how he was overbearing and how they need to take him out sooner rather than later. And similar to Toni, when I was watching the episode, I really got the sense that he was going to be taken out here. And sure enough, he was taken out. He even got up before the votes were even finished. So it's not too surprising seeing him go out here. Now, I will say it was pretty fun seeing him play here, really switching things up and being more of an aggressive player. However, at the end of the day, it didn't really work out for him. So because of that, he is here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and this is where things get a bit interesting here. We have the next boot on the board, and here we have Steffi. And yeah, this is a little embarrassing. I had her at number 1. I felt like her edit was really starting to pick up here, only for her to be taken out relatively early here. And I understand why. I mean, she was someone who is seeming to be a pretty big threat, someone who is pretty well positioned with her being part of the full package, part of the Breakfast Club, but also someone who was closely aligned to Killarney to the point where she had a final 2 with Killarney. However, we even see Killarney turn on her here, and we really see the No BS Alliance forming this move to get her out. We see Marion getting put on board, like in order to avoid being the obvious target with all her advantages. And sure enough, Steffi is blindsided here with an idol in her pocket. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a surprise to see Steffi go out here. Now, admittedly, once the episode started and once we saw it really play out, I did get the sense that she was probably going to be the boot here. But if you had told me at the beginning of the week that she would be taken out before Marion or even Meryl, I would have been a bit surprised. But that's just Survivor SA for you. But I'm pretty impressed by Steffi. She definitely changed things up, and she was definitely playing pretty well. It's just that she had a trouble managing her perception, and eventually she just became too big of a threat. She was too obviously well positioned, and with Meryl being too clear of a target there, they decided to go with the next most likely option in Steffi. So because of that, Steffi is taken out here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and we have the final boot from this batch of episodes, and here we have Meryl. And to me, Meryl seemed like a pretty clear target over the last couple episodes, and admittedly, I did have her relatively high for a lot of the season, but even by the merge, I was starting to recognize that there were some holes in her edit that could lead to her being taken out here, like her talk about not wanting to work with Dante and her like being so willing to cut Dante at relatively early opportunity. And I feel like through this, it really just made Meryl too big of a target. I mean, that and the advantages as well, but obviously getting rid of Dante was a bit of a mistake here. And yes, while she was able to work with, BS Alliance to take out Steffi over her, I mean, it wasn't really enough to secure long term, and she was obviously taken out here. And I feel like Meryl played pretty well for the most part. Now, granted, she did get a bit of flack for her social game, where we heard people talking about how she's presenting herself as a social player, only for her to come off as a bit fake to a lot of people. And then obviously her threat management wasn't ideal. I mean, she took out Dante, who was a pretty big shield for her, and that just opened up her to be taken out soon after. So it's not too surprising for her to go out here, but still, it was interesting to see her play this season. So because of that, I do have her here at number 8. And with that, there are 7 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely it is that they'll win the game, based on their game position, and the edit that they've gotten up to this point. And admittedly, this was a very weird week in terms of their edits, where I felt like a lot of people definitely got some pretty flawed edits. Some people definitely dropped off. Although I feel like it's also helped me to solidify opinions on certain other people, but we'll get to that soon enough. But at number 7, the person I believe is the least likely to win the game from this point is Killarney. And I know last week I did have her a bit higher, mainly because I felt like her edit was pointing towards this storyline of her like biding her time and waiting. And yeah, like, well, from a pure game perspective, that definitely set her up to justify her being dragged to the end and then her being accused of not really playing the game. I felt like it was a through line that could have led to her potentially making a move. However, I feel like this week has really demonstrated that, yeah, she's probably not going to have that much of a road to a win at the end of the day. I mean, we literally see her trying to take credit for moves that she really didn't have much of a role in. I mean, we obviously see her talking to Dino in the last episode about how she was the reason that Dino was saved during the Sheamus round, only for Dino to immediately say that he was already saved and Killarney had very little to do with that, which is largely justified. And we also have her taking credit for the Steffi move and how the Marion move is her idea and how she's setting all the wheels into motion, despite the fact that we aren't really seeing that much other than her word. And we also hear people saying that Killarney just isn't that involved in the game. I mean, even when she's talking about getting rid of Meryl, I mean, we also hear other people saying how Killarney is behind and how everyone's already on board with voting at Meryl. So by her acting like she's the one coming up with the idea, that it really shows just how behind she is in the game. And at the end of the day, I feel like at this point, any potential of her being an underdog is mostly gone. Now, I will say that the one thing keeping her in some contention is simply the fact that this is Survivor SA, so really anything can happen. But I feel like this last week of episodes really highlighted that any potential I felt like she had of her making this big move and biding her time was really like led to nothing. And yes, while she may get to the end, I feel like she's probably not going to have the respect to win. So I can't really have her too much higher than this. So because of that, I have her here at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6. And I feel like this person is probably going to be voted out before Killarney. However, they also got quite a dip in their edit. But here we have Taijin. And this was not a great week for Taijin by any means. I mean, edit-wise, he was shown being pretty bitter and taking things a bit personally when it comes to not being picked for the reward, and then him making all the rice and then saying he's not going to have any despite people pleading with him to do so, really acting like a martyr here. And we hear people talking about how Taijin's hard to work with, how he's not reliable, how they need to wait until the last possible moment to cue him into things. And then at the same time, he's being presented as a threat. I mean, he's been doing pretty well in the challenges, always coming in second place or having leads and then blowing them. I mean, all of this just isn't boding well for him, and I don't really see much of a path for him to get to the end of the game. Now, granted, he is sort of included in the talks, and he was presented as the swing vote during the Steffi round, but I feel like at this point, I mean, who's taking Taijin to the end? I mean, obviously he lost a lot of his closer allies early in the merge, like a Toni. And at this point, with people not really trusting him too much, with people sort of seeing him as not that great of a player, despite him being seen as a bit ahead of his time at the time of his original season, and with people not really wanting to take him to the end, it's not looking great for Taijin, and I feel like the edit isn't really backing him up super well. But similar to Killarney, I mean, this is SA, and I feel like he's a bit more likely to win a jury vote than someone like a Killarney. But still, with all these things going against him, I can't really see him getting to the end of the game. And in general, I can't see him really winning the game. So because of that, I do have him here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5. And I feel like this person kind of has not played the best game in the world. However, I feel like they have a bit more potential to actually win the game. But here we have Shane. And I feel like similar to Taijin, Shane's edit has just not been there for a lot of it. And arguably, you can say that Shane has had more holes from earlier on in the season than a Taijin. However, I feel like the main thing going for Shane is, one, I feel like he had a slightly better week than a Taijin, both from a gameplay perspective and from an edit perspective, where gameplay-wise, I mean, he is not in the best position, but he still has Marion, so there's that. We do still have people talking to him about certain votes, although even then, I mean, we've seen this throughout the season that people don't really trust him too much. I mean, even when he's trying to convince like a Dino or a Phil to like do what's in their best interest. I mean, we see him basically just laugh at Shane and feel like he's not very trustworthy. And then edit wise, I mean, admittedly, his edit hasn't been the greatest in the world either. But we did see him, like in this last episode, talking about how Marion seems to be working more with Dino and how Dino doesn't seem to be super trustworthy at the end of the day. And he's really questioning a lot of Marion's rationale for wanting to work with Dino. So I feel like that's something at least, and that's something that could make him a bit more likely to win than Taijin. However, I still don't feel the best about Shane, and I can't really say he's played the best game either, so because of that, he is here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and I feel like number 4 and number 3 are largely similar in my view, in that I don't honestly feel like either of them are going to actually win the game. However, I feel like the main thing separating number 4 and 3 is game position right now. But number 4, we do have Marion here. And I've always said from the beginning how I always question Marion's actual win equity, as again, I feel like she was in a similar position to Anesu from Unity Island or Omer from 42, where she has largely been the main character of the season, been getting a lot of positive content along the way, but also makes me question, like, if SA is going to make their winner this obvious, and I still hold to that truth to a large degree. Mind you, I still feel like Marion got plenty of decent content here, despite her not like doing super well game wise. She obviously does turn on her alliance, the full package, cutting both Steffi and Meryl. And honestly, I am a bit surprised that she ended up being the last member of the full package remaining, as I really felt like she would have been cut along the way. And really, this seemed like the time in the game where she probably would have been cut here. Like, so there's that to consider. And even now, like, she still has a path forward. I mean, she has Dino, she has Shane to a degree. However, I still get the feeling that it would be too obvious to make Marion the winner here. And plus, you have what she was talking about in this last episode when talking to Dino about how she wants a strong winner to come out of this season. And I am very mixed on that actual comment, as on one hand, you could argue that she's talking about herself. I mean, she has played a relatively good game for the most part. I mean, it's not without its flaws, but she has played a strong game. And that could be interpreted as her demonstrating how she not only cares about the game and that she doesn't want someone like a Killarney to be dragged to the end, but also as a way of showing her own commitment to playing a strong game herself. But on the other hand, I mean, it's also very possible that she could have just been talking about Dino and how this could be as an excuse for her to drag along someone like a Dino, someone who could very well beat her in the end or cut her towards the end without like her like realizing it. And the fact that this is followed up by Shane talking about how it's strange that Marion is so willing to work with Dino. I mean, yes, there's some context that Shane is missing there, but also like could lead to a downfall here where perhaps Marion trusts Dino too much, and by the end, she ends up getting betrayed by him. So it's sort of a mixed bag for me, and at this point, I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. If I had to make a judgment now, I'd say it's probably a bit more negative, as again, you want a winner who is willing to win at any cost and not really care so much about who you take further into the game, so long as you don't make yourself too big of a threat. So at the end of the day, I would still say it's a net negative, but she's not dead either. I mean, she could still very well pull out the win. Maybe this is just SA's way of surprising me once again. But for now, with everything considered, I feel like 4 is about as high as you can put her. So because of that, she's here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3. And in a weird twist from like the previous power rankings, the top 3 are all part of the same alliance. Only this time it's the No BS alliance in the top 3. And similar to the past rankings, it's just a matter of the order. But number 3, we probably have the biggest threat of the 3, and probably the one who's probably the most likely to be cut towards the end. But here we have Dino. And I feel like Dino has kind of become a Marion figure to me, where he's obviously gotten a relatively big edit for the most part, and he's largely been presented as this big player. However, that does make me question whether he's truly going to be the winner at the end of the day. And given the way that he's played, and given the fact that they've highlighted some of his flaws as a player, like the fact that he's willing to make all these big moves and how he can be pretty clumsy with managing his threat level, I mean, those aren't the best signs for him from a pure game position. Now, granted, editing wise, it's not necessarily the worst at this point, as again, it could just help us get to know Dino as a player better. So there's that. You also have Marion's comments in the last episode about how she wants the season to have a strong winner and how she was kind of referring to Dino in that conversation and how that could potentially be parlayed into her wanting to trust Dino and take him further into the game. So that's something that could benefit him to a degree. And also, I feel like he's been getting a lot of pretty decent strategic content for the most part. So there's definitely ways for Dino to win this game. And plus, the fact that he is technically in a better game position right now, being in the core of the No BS Alliance, is a big reason why I do have him at least above Marion. However, it's, again, the fact that he is someone who's gotten a lot of content, plus he's someone who I could very easily see being taken out for being a big threat, that does make me hesitate with putting him much higher than this. So because of that, I do have him here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and honestly, I kind of struggled with number 1 and 2, as honestly, I could see either of these people win the game from this point, and I feel like each of them had different pros and cons in terms of their actual win equity, but I'll do my best to make a decision here. But number 2, for this week, I did decide to go with Felix. And I actually considered putting Felix at number 1 at one point, as I feel like he's been a more consistent narrator during a lot of this post-merge here, where he's constantly getting content, like narrating like his thoughts on the game. And in these last batch of episodes, we did get to hear him talking a lot about his options and how he's had some difficult votes here, voting out Dante, voting out like Steffi and Marion, and saying how has his conflict between his morals and the actual game. But I do feel like he is someone who is still a bit more committed to the game than to his morals, and he's willing to put all that aside. So I feel like those are still pretty positive aspects to Felix's edit so far. And plus, I feel like he's less likely to be targeted soon than someone like a Dino. So at least there's that. Now, I did decide to have him a bit lower, as again, I feel like with all this narration, I mean, he could just be set up as this final hurdle for the eventual winner of the season. And I do worry that it may just be a bit too much. Now, granted, the number 1 person has some arguably bigger holes in their edit, but I feel like there's also ways to justify those to a degree. And again, this could change as well. I am still very uncertain about how these two will fare against each other as we get down to the home stretch here. But for now, I did decide to leave Felix a little lower, and he's here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor SA Return of the Outcasts right now is Phil. And again, I feel like it was pretty close between him and Felix. However, I think for me, it largely came down to the fact that Phil just doesn't seem as obvious a winner as someone like a Felix or a Dino or a Marion. He's obviously in the No BS Alliance, so there's that. But at the same time, he's also been shown as being a pretty active player for a lot of it. He's shown in a lot of conversations, kind of similar to Felix in a lot of ways. And I feel like he's probably someone who could garner a lot of respect if he were to get to the end, sort of in that Dino spot. And especially if someone like a Dino were to be cut, I could definitely see Phil inheriting a lot of the credit for a lot of the moves that the No BS Alliance has made. So there's that. And there's obviously his big hole, like being in the Shonovo, which I did kind of hold against him for the longest time. But as time has gone on, I've kind of reconciled that to a degree here, where I feel like a lot of the episode where Shown has voted out, I mean, Phil was kind of shielded for a lot of that. I mean, because yes, while it was a bad decision, they didn't want to show him in too negatively of a light here, and they really dedicated more of the episode afterwards to have Phil explain a lot of his rationale there. And so far, it doesn't seem like it's harmed him too much. I mean, he's still working with Dino, who obviously was kind of upset with him at the time, but they've since come around to that. So I feel like Phil, similar to the other No BS members, is in a pretty strong position to get towards the end of the game. And with Phil seeming like the person more likely to inherit a lot of the goodwill that the No BS Alliance has made in the post-merge, I feel like Phil's definitely in a strong spot to win. Now, as I said with Felix, all that could change. I mean, again, I'm still pretty uncertain about who's actually the most likely to win. This endgame could get pretty interesting if I'm being pretty honest. But it's just all those things I considered that does give Phil the edge here for this week. So because of that, I do have him here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Obviously, I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings once again. Should be a very fun week of the show. Obviously, Big Brother is happening right now, and I'm updating power rankings for that as well. So stay tuned for that as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server. I'll leave a link to join in the description. A lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that is the video. See ya.